Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Stephanie Garami, and I'm the Marketing Communications Manager here at Onboard. As I'm sure you guys know now, I work on all aspects of marketing here at the company and have been working very closely on this webinar series. The purpose of today's webinar is to talk about what data brokers and agents must have on their websites and how having this data will benefit all parties involved, including agents, brokerages, and home buyers. With that in mind, I'm very happy to introduce the presenter of this webinar, Colleen Staunton, our resident product expert. Colleen has been managing all aspects of Onboard's products and solutions, including our hosted applications, web services, and all our core content for the past 3 years. I'll turn it over to Colleen.
Thanks, Stephanie. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today for our last webinar. Probably be a little bit briefer in topic, just going to discuss, I think there's a lot to discuss, but we want to go through the finer points of, what are the top data points that make a difference on a site that are important to consumers and agents and brokers. So we're just going to go through that, show a couple examples. I think it's probably things that are already well known to all of you out there, but it's just good to see that and talk through that as well. So here, just some of the brief things we're going to talk about. What are the goals, consumer pain points, what data are consumers demanding, and if you've been on any of the other webinars, you'll know that it kind of all ties together, and you'll see a theme, which is pretty much on purpose because all of this stuff goes together to create a great experience for all those involved. So the trends are there, and then we'll show how people benefit and what brokerages are implementing on their sites as well. So quickly, the goals of agent and broker websites. And this, again, we deal closely with our clients. We work with them on their implementations, through the whole process of, when they start working with our data to they implement to post-implementation. So, these are kind of some of the things that we're hearing. Attract home buyers in the local market. Obviously, that's a huge key. You have national brokerages, and I think sometimes, they have great sites and they have the data, but, ultimately you end up using sites of those in the local market, and they're trying to attract those home buyers and, ways to go about that. Be the go-to site locally. Again, it kind of goes into the first one, but I think this is key because we all know that consumers are coming to the internet. So, knowing that your site is going to be, the #1 site, it's, well talked about. People, refer their friends to that site. It has all the right data, the correct data, the right things on it. It's pretty important. But, just as important, more important really, is the ability to capture leads. So, a home buyer comes to a site, and it's great that you have this information for them, that they're able to look around, they spend time on your site, but you really want to pull them in, and there's different ways to do that. So the ability to capture leads, and you can use data to do this, actually. Have the most recent and up-to-date data. So, this is again, constant interaction that we have from our clients, and their end users want to know if the data is recent, if it's been updated. So that's a very key component. It's great if you have 2000 census information, but places have changed drastically from year to year. So over a 10-year period, you may have gone from a retiree type community to more of a middle-aged family type community. So, having that data where consumers can look for it on their website is important. SEO, again, that comes into making sure the page rankings, you're getting that SEO benefit from it. Provide local information and updates to their market. So, this isn't just data, but, includes blog posts, RSS news feeds, where people can see, what's some of the, maybe top headlines of today's news or in the past week, or even just local trends that you can pull from different sites. So consumer pain points, and I bring this up because they play well, or they kind of play nicely with one another. There's no other information on sites besides property data. And I think we see this a lot with some sites. You're a home buyer, you go, you search for listings, it's great, I can see all the beds, the baths, but I don't know what's around it. I can't even, sometimes you can't even see photos. You get one or two photos, and it doesn't really, okay, well, is there a yard, or it says it has 2 baths, but well, what does that second bath look like? So, having all that other local information is the most, one of the most important things from a consumer point of view. Linking off to external sites for third-party information. I think a lot of sites still do this, and they do it because they have to, and it's great data that they're linking off to, but I think consumers can get frustrated because I don't want a million different windows popping up when I'm looking. I want to get back. Okay, so I've navigated and I'm all the way at point X, but I want to get back to point B where I can view more about the house, or I can see, okay, who's the agent, or what's the brokerage in here. Not being able to navigate through a site effectively. And this has something to do with, how agents and brokerages kind of structure their site, and it really is just that, flow of you search for listings, you search the local area, you reach out to an agent, or maybe you're searching the local area, you find listings, you view the photos, and all that other information. Sometimes it's all over the place, and you can't navigate effectively, and ultimately you just get frustrated and leave the site. Submitted contact information being lost in the system. This is, I want to reach out to an agent. I'm just going to send an email and have them give them my email, and I never hear back from them. It could be one of two things. The agent just hasn't reached back out to me, or that something happened to that lead information along the way, and it never reached the brokerage or the agent. Limited search criteria. This is more, I can go in and search for a house in New York, and again, that might work for some people, but okay, so I got to filter through millions of properties starting at $10 million a piece, and my price range is $500,000 to $400,000. So limiting the search criteria that people can search with it can be frustrating as well. And then you have inaccurate or missing listings, and this might be there's been a price change. They know about the price change. They've seen it on other sites, but they don't see it on that site. So the listing information isn't up to date. There's you have gone through the neighborhood and you see houses for sale, but you can't find them online. There's a lot of different reasons why that might happen, but again, a huge pain point from a consumer's standpoint. So creating a complete picture for home buyers, how, what is involved with that? And I think, there's a lot of mini steps in here that probably, we could talk about forever, but the first is to create a visually appealing site. And, I think everybody knows this, but, I kind of reference, if you've ever been to citydata.com, they have great information on there. They have so much information, but, it's not necessarily the most appealing, looking at it. You feel like you're stuck back in, 1990 searching the web. So, people just like to see things that are simple, easy to use, but they look nice, and go from there. They might even just leave the site because, it looks like it was done by a second grader, so they're going to, in their minds, like, well, is this a serious website or not? And there's some questions there. The next is having the property search, obviously the most important. I mean, if you're going to bring somebody to your site, you want them to search your listings. I think there's still some surprisingly some sites out there that don't necessarily have a great property search, or they might not have much. They just put a few listings up on the site, okay, view these, but don't really let the user search. And the neighborhood or local search, and we're going to talk about this in a bit more detail because this comes into the points about the data. This is just as important as the property search, because if you don't have it, people will just ultimately go elsewhere. The next step is to locate 4 and 5, locate offices and locate agents. People want to know, there's still a good number of home buyers that don't have an agent. So, where is the closest office? Can I locate an agent and reach out to them? Those definitely are ways to really make your presence known to the home buyer. What is neighborhood or local search? And this, again, some of it might be repeat, but I think it's good to talk about. You can provide more context. It's providing more context around the listing search. And whether you do that up front or whether you do that after a person has found a listing, really is up to you and how you want to design your site. But, it's not just the beds and the baths. It's, where are there schools, where are the convenience stores and police stations, firehouses around an area. So again, all of that is part of this local search. And it has to be easily accessible from property pages. I think sometimes you can have a disjointed experience where you have one section for your property search, and then in the top bar you'll do, you'll have, which makes sense, you could do neighborhood pages, but link to those neighborhood pages from the listing search. Make them accessible, or just put the information right on the listing so people don't even have to you don't have to make it harder for them. Complete and accurate information. So, I think this kind of goes to the, is the information up to date, and is it complete? So, can I see, maybe I have, somebody might throw out, okay, the median age is 45 in this area, but okay, so what else about the area? I mean, people will want to see a little bit richer context around that as well. Allow search for different geography levels. And this is kind of relevant, it kind of goes back, some of it, to the lifestyle information, such as, are people looking at neighborhoods? Are they, is it a town-based, a zip code? People don't always necessarily think in zip codes, or they might. So, it's really dependent on an individual person. And then again, the display of multiple data sets. This goes, you have community information, school information, points of interest. But, I mean, there's so much else. You can have news feeds that you bring in from your local newspapers or local websites. So, again, it's a number of different items in just having a full experience for those home buyers. What data points do consumers demand? So, well, I'll get to those in a second, but data that gives insight into the local community is the top demanded information. It's what people are going to want to see. So, you could have some data that, might not even make sense, but, really when you think about it, does it give color to, what type of neighborhood or what the local area is like. And it's information that can help narrow down their choices. This might, you think about somebody wants a short commute time, or they want to live within walking distance of schools. They're going to narrow their choices down by that, so having that available. So what do we consider the top 5 data points? And I think just looking at what our clients have implemented over the years, and we know that home buyers are looking at, just from feedback from them as well, the first is community information. And that includes all your, what are the people in the area like? What's the age? What's their income breakdown? White collar, blue collar, housing stability figures. So is it a transient community, or have people lived there for, 20 to 30 years? The school profiles and ratings and reviews. It's great to have school profiles because, especially now with overcrowded classrooms, parents want to know, what enrollment and staffing figures are, but also having that qualitative information like ratings and reviews is definitely of interest. It gives insight into the schools, into what, just the local community in general. The points of interest, again, this is, really helps consumers see what's around, narrow down their choices. So, it's great that I have a house in mind, but, I don't want to have to always drive around an area to see, okay, well, it looks like the closest Burger King is 20 miles away. Having that information on the site where the consumer can look, and then they have questions and they can reach out to, they can talk to an agent about it. Maybe the agent is ultimately going to have much more insight into the community, and they can tell them that as well. Recent home sales transactions. I think this is important, and we find a lot of people like to look at this information to see, are the home sales, what's sold in the area? So maybe a house sold next door, what did that sell at? That might help me make a decision whether I want to buy now, or even to, what can I offer? I'm going to get comps from an agent. They're going to provide that information. But again, I think it will help the consumer narrow down choices based on trends. And the next one is the home sales trends. Are neighborhoods declining in price, or are they appreciating in price? Which, somebody might refer a neighborhood that's appreciating, but others might want to get it on the decline because, A, you're getting more for your money. Ultimately over time you're going to be able to, you'll have more equity in your house and things like that. So again, I think those are some of the top data points. There are some others, but I think these are definitely the key ones. So we're going to get into talking about the brokerages. What top brokerages try to achieve on their websites. And I think it's pretty similar to some of the things we just discussed on agents, what agents and brokers have. So, lead generation, obviously very, very key to have, and you're going to see a lot more brokerages using different tools and data to generate these leads. A fluid search experience for consumers, and we really can't emphasize enough that we work with a lot of developers, and it's really kind of how to create that. It's great to put all this up on your site, but if you don't have a plan, it's not going to be effective. Detailed property listings with photos. I think it's kind of the Redfin model. What information can I get that I can put on the site so that everybody has without overloading them? And photos play a huge part. I think there's been a big emphasis on making sure they're quality photos. So you can go, anybody can take a photo now, but it's really important to make sure that you have quality photos on there that people are going to look at, because they may rule out a house just on the photos that were placed on the site. Top brokerages supporting local information around listings. I mean, that doesn't change at what level of, if you're a top brokerage, a national brokerage, or an agent, it's still all very relevant, and what, a key goal is as well. Unique and new tools for customers to use, and there's a lot of them out there, and some brokerages are creating their own that they're ultimately supplying to the local offices and agents. But there's others that, they're sourcing out, lifestyle search, again, that's an example for one of them. And then, again, SEO. I think that's always a goal for any company with a website. So I'm just going to talk now about some implementation examples. And, we'll show these because, you may see some similarities in things that are on your site or on your broker site. But here's Century 21, and a couple things to point out. You'll notice the photos, right? And it's kind of small, but they are actually very good quality photos. You can see the presentation is very simple but easy to look at. They have it broken out. They give a property description. They could possibly even put some more features in here. That's something that they might be trying, or they might be adding. But ultimately, that information, the consumer is going to want to know it. So again, but then here's some of that additional information, right? And I just took a kind of a quick snapshot of it. But you can see the demographic information, obviously very important, and you could filter. So they had space issues, and one of the things they did was just allow a drop down for users to use instead of just throwing it all up there at once. And then your school information, and this is your individual schools themselves, but then with the ratings that those schools have. So again, that they're making this available right on the actual property website or on the property page, and it's easy for the consumer to navigate through. The next one, Better Homes and Garden. They use, on this one, this is the recent home sales transactions, and you can see, kind of a rough, they're plotting it on a map, but, they're showing what if you click on one of these, you'll see what the beds, the baths, the square feet are, but you can see the prices. And again, some powerful information, and you'll notice that it's right next to current listings. So as a user, I go in, I'm searching listings. Oh, you know what, let me see what's available, or what has sold in the area lately and what they've sold for. So another good implementation. This is actually, I believe, on Trulia, and it's school information. And again, a lot of information on these pages. I know it's not a brokerage, but this information could very easily appear on any agent or broker site, and it's good to have. Here they give the actual school, but you also can see the parent reviews, which are here, which are helpful. Here they're just showing one snippet, but you could have a few as well. The next is Washington Post, and I think we're just showing an implementation of the points of interest. So there's a couple brokerages that have implementation similar to this. Coldwell Banker has a map-based points of interest search. So you could filter by what you want, and again, you can very easily see what's around an area. So if you're looking at this listing right here, you can kind of, it's not interactive unfortunately, but you can see, okay, here's some restaurants, here's the movie theaters. I think I'd like to explore this place a little more. So then here is Home Trends, and this just gives again, you can see how many transactions are taking place over the last however many quarters. What's the average or median sales price? I'm only interested in condos. Let me look at that type of information. So again, some good information. So I just want to quickly touch on, I think that there's a lot to talk about. I mean, data points, you kind of, not everybody likes to talk about the technical aspect of it, or, data's kind of ugly, I guess. But, the good part is that, a lot of this can be accomplished very easily. And there's ways to go about it, depending on, your needs. And I think it's just important to realize that having this stuff on your site is going to make it stronger. It's going to help you ultimately in the long run. Apologize. So any questions that we have, we can answer. You can type those in, and we can address those. In the meantime, I do believe this was our last webinar. We might be having another webinar series again in the near future, and hopefully we're going to try and touch on some different topics just to keep it varied and find things that are interesting for everybody. I don't think I have any questions. So I appreciate everybody attending. And if you do want to reach out, you have the number and the email address. Even with just comments on how we might be able to improve or any topic suggestions would be great as well. All right, everybody. Thank you for attending. Bye.